الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار سبيله إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, we'll be continuing discussing the book Nukhbatul Fikr, and this is a summary of the book of Nukhbatul Fikr by Hafid ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah ta'ala. So one of those books, or one of the renowned books in Ilm al-Mustalah or Ulum al-Hadith, and this is authored by Ibn Hajar, and many have done work around this book, and of those who have made talkhis or mukhtasarat of the book of Ibn Hajar. So we have been covering or studying this particular mukhtasar that is done by one of the mu'asir. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll pick up from where we had stopped in the last session. So in the last session, we had covered matters regarding ziyarat al-thiqa and what's the approach of the ulama on this topic and the importance of this topic. And today we'll build on this by discussing what the author here, they mention Ibn Hajar, and also the Mulakhas, where they mention regarding the next matter to be discussed, where they mention falamma, where discussed concerning matter that he mentioned falamma bayyin al-hafiz al-hukm az-ziyarat al-thiqa انتقل إلى بيان مصطلحات التي تنتج عن مخالفة عن من يقبل حديثهم بعضهم عن بعض. So of that he mentioned regarding concern that the next matter to be discussed, where he mentioned here regarding concern this matter regarding hadith, as he stated here إذا خالف الثقة من هو ثقة أو أثقن منه فيسمى حديث أوثق وأثقن محفوظ ويسمى حديث الثقة أقل درجة شاذ. So this discussion is regarding this matter regarding what is discussed regarding discussing hadith which is said to be among the thiqat, when hadith is said to be shadh and hadith is said to be mahfuz. So this will be the topic of our discussion. So the topic of our discussion that he mentioned that is discussing when hadith is said to be referred to as shadh and when a hadith is referred to as mahfuz. So what are these two mustalahat, these two terminology that are used amongst the ulama of hadith? So that will be our discussion today regarding hadith al-shadh and also hadith al-mahfuz. So on this discussion, so with this discussion regarding al-shadh wal mahfuz, we'll discuss shadh more and then mahfuz after, as most of the discussion is related to hadith al-shadh. And as for shadh, they start by discussing regarding concerning that why this is discovered in ilm al-hadith as in the definition of hadith al-sahih. So hadith al-sahih, it has 5 conditions. And one of those conditions is that the hadith should be free from anything which is shudhuz, adam al-shudhuz. So it plays an important role regarding grading a hadith, that a person is able to can detect when this illah, which is shadh, is present, and as it will decide what the hadith is said to be, or and the grade that hadith will be given based upon this. So he mentioned here regarding concerning that, as we said, ashadh or shudhuz, that the word ashadh linguistically it means munfarid or infirad. It means munfarid. So they mentioned that ashadh, it means something which is munfarid, that someone has somewhat or munfarid and jama, the person somewhat have break away from the jama. So ashadh, munfarid, the person like on their own, one have moved away from the group. So this is ashadh, munfarid. So the person is single on his own, or the odd. So this is ashadh, or munfarid and jama, the person have moved away from the jama, moved away from the main body or the majority or the group. So as for ashadh, istilahan, according to ulama of hadith, then it carries, we'll discuss that a khilaf between the ulama of hadith regarding how they define ashadh. So you have a khilaf between the ulama of hadith as to how they define what is hadith to shadh. Because of time, and also even more so because of this level, we won't per se try to cover all the definition of hadith shadh, as the discussion, it surrounds what is mentioned here by Ibn Hajar, and also what is mentioned by Ibn Hajar. And this is the more, this is now the definition that is used by many regarding what is said to be shadh hadith, and also taken from what is mentioned by Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. But Ibn Hajar, there's something to be mindful of, that Ibn Hajar, when he mentioned regarding Ash-Shadh in his book Nukhbatul Fikr, that he mentioned the word shadh with definitions in over 3 places. So hadith shadh is somewhat repeated in 3 different areas, that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, that he gave definition in his book Nuzhat al-Nazar regarding hadith shadh. فقال, in one place, ما رواه مقبول مخالفا لمن هو أولى منه. So of the definition that he has given regarding ashadh, هو ما رواه مقبول, that it is what has been narrated by one, those who are said to be maqbul, acceptable narrators. مخالف, that contradicts. لمن هو أوثى من, those that are more reliable than they are, those that are more suitable than they are. Also, he have mentioned regarding concerning hadith, that when he discussed concerning hadith as-sahih and give a definition of hadith as-sahih, he also mentioned al-thiqa, adam al-shudhuz. So he mentioned adam al-shudhuz, where he mentioned that ashadh ma yukhalif fihi ar-rawi man huwa arja minhu. So another definition he gives, that as for shadh, he mentioned it is ma yukhalif fihi rawi, that when a narrator contradicts man huwa arja minhu, one who's more suitable than he is. So the second definition of hadith ashadh. And also when he discussed hadith sayy al-hif, when he discussed hadith sayy al-hif, he mentioned that of this sayy al-hif, he mentioned لراوي في جميع حالاته فهو شاذ على الرهي بعد آل الحديث. So he discussed also again regarding concerning that hadith ashadh in that context, but the meaning that is more used and more taken from Ibn Hajar is the one that he mentioned previous, that hadith ashadh, as he mentioned, that as he state in this, as he state, ما رواه المقبول, and the narration given by one who's maqbul, an acceptable narrator, مخالفا, in contradicting, لمن هو أولى منه, contradicting one who's more reliable than he is. Or he give another dimension, ما يخالف فيه الراوي من هو أرجح منه. So both those narration are those definitions are very similar. Both those definitions are somewhat similar, where he mentioned that rawi maqbul yukhalif, go against one who is arja minhu, or one who is awla minhu, that is more reliable than he is. And that's the definition that is somewhat more widely used today. The definition of shadh is that definition that is mentioned by Ibn Hajar, that is the one which is more widely used today. Another definition that is mentioned, so of those who are given that definition, I mentioned that ashadh, hadith shadh, that they'll define concerning that, they use the word either maqbul, and they'll state that yukhalif al-rawi maqbul. I mentioned that ma rawahu al-maqbul, so someone mentioned ma rawahu maqbul, or someone mentioned ma rawahu al-thiqa. So someone mentioned the word thiqa instead of the word maqbul. But some believe that it is more suitable to use the word maqbul, and that would include those narrators that are said to be of sahih hadith, and also hadith which is hasan, acceptable hadith. So narrators who are generally considered to be reliable narrators, whether they fall in the category of sahih or in the category of hadith al-maqbul, but they are somewhat reliable and accepted to a degree. So that's one definition to give us. So they mentioned that ma rawahu al-thiqa, or ma rawahu maqbul mukhalifan man huwa awthaq minhu aw awla aw arja bil qabul. That's the definition that is mentioned that surrounds the definition of Ibn Hajar. That's the definition of Ibn Hajar in general. Ma rawahu thiqa or maqbul مخالفا, that contradicts, من هو أوثق منه, one who's more reliable than him regarding إتقان والضبط, أو أولى بالقبول, or this person in this case is more reliable than he is, or أرجى منه, or أولى or أرجى منه. That's concerning hadith الشاذ. Another definition is mentioned by the ulama. So there are for shad two definitions that stands. That's the one that is mentioned by Ibn Hajar, and the one that was said followed by, that's the one that is the established definition but by many. They mention a second definition or added definition, أو ما تفرد بروايته راو ليس عنده من الضبط ما يحتمل معه تفرده بتلك الرواية, meaning that a narrator that as a odd, that a single narrator that have mentioned something that needs to be substantiated. Him on his own does not give much strength to that narration, but he's thicker. So narrator who is thicker, but who have mentioned something on his own as a single narrator, contrary to what is mentioned by others, but it requires, it doesn't have that level of support compared to the others. That is also what is said to be hadith al-thiqa. So hadith al-thiqa or hadith al-shadh is of those two parts, hadith al-shadh, and that's the definition that is given by Ibn Daqiq al-Eid and al-Dhahabi. That kind of somewhat they include those two components as being a part of hadith al-shadh. ما رواه مقبول مخالف لمن هو أوثق منه أو أرجى منه أو أولى منه. And second, that mention ما تفرد به الراوي ثقة ما يحتمل تفرده, that a person who is ثقة, but one have to pay attention to the thing that you have narrates on his own. It doesn't have that level of support. That's concerning the definition. As we mentioned, there's others who have given definition. Khalili, Al-Hakim, Ibn Salah, and others have given definition of hadith al-shadh. But as we said, what is now the standard that is followed are these two definitions that are mentioned. The one of Ibn Hajar, and also could say the definition that is mentioned by Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, and also al-Dhahabi in their book Al-Muqida wal-Ikhtirah. With hadith al-shadh, that this is an indication as a definition, ما رواه مقبول أو ما رواه الثقة مخالف لمن وأرجى منه, where the narrators that are involved in hadith al-shadh, that their narrators were thiqat. So these are narrators who are thiqat. So it is a part. So it's narrators who are said to be thiqat. Their narration are normally accepted, whether by the way of the category of sahih hadith or hasan hadith. So ordinarily their narrations are accepted, but in this case they are contradicting. They're going in contrary to someone who's equally or more that someone who's more reliable than they are in this particular case. And the person that is more reliable than them could be the person is more of a higher degree compared to the one that have that single narration, that addition, that the one who's said to be have that extra wording, or that is contradicting, or it could be added. You have more compared to one, so you have a group saying one thing and another saying something else. So either can itqan wa dabt wal hifz, or al adad or adad. So the person that they are more become more reliable. Their narration become more reliable, more acceptable. More reliable, more acceptable than the person who is a single person coming with something they did not say. With hadith al-thiqa, that they mention يمكن أن يقع في السند وفي المتن. So regarding hadith shadh, that it can occur, so hadith shadh, that it can occur in the isnad, so shadh can occur in the isnad, and likewise it occur in the matan or both together. So it could appear in the isnad, the chain, and also it can appear in the matan. So it occurs or both. So they mentioned regarding concerns in ash-shudhuz can occur in the isnad, the chain. As for in the isnad, that they mentioned here regarding concern, an example, min tariq Muhammad ibn Fudail, an Amash, an Abi Saleh, an Abi Hurairah, an Nabi alayhi salam, قال إن للصلاة أولا وآخرا. That with the salat, it has a starting point and an ending point. So that's the hadith. That's the hadith. That the hadith in the At-Tirmidhi, where the Prophet alayhi salam, where the hadith is mentioned by way of the isnad, min tariq Muhammad ibn Fudail, who narrates upon Amash and Abi Saleh and Abi Hurairah. So we have the hadith, Muhammad ibn Fudail, who narrates upon Amash, Amash upon Abu Saleh, and Abu Saleh upon Abu Hurairah, and Abu Hurairah upon the Prophet alayhi salam. Where the Prophet alayhi salam said in his hadith that this salat awalan wa akhiran, a salat, it has a start and an end. They mentioned regarding concern this hadith that all the narrators are said to be that this hadith also a jama' who have narrated this hadith, that they mention amongst them Abi Ishaq, Fazari, Zaida ibn Qudama, who have narrated this hadith, and Amash and Mujahid, قال كان يقال. That so the other narration of this hadith, the isnad of this hadith also, that where you find that Muhammad ibn Fudail, that you have others who have narrated the same hadith of his colleagues, that they have mentioned of them Abi Ishaq, Fazari, Zahida ibn Qudama, who narrates upon Amash. So Amash have those three, Muhammad ibn Fudail, also Zahida ibn Qudama, and Abi Ishaq, Fazai, that they all narrate upon Amash. And from Amash, one, and Mujahid, two mention Mujahid, and Mujahid قال, those they mention قال, كان يقول, that they used to say, إن للصلاة أولا وآخرا. So he didn't narrate upon the Prophet alayhi salam. So narration of Abu Ishaq and Zaid ibn Qudama and Amash and Mujahid, that narrated up, not going back to the Prophet alayhi salam. Mursala or Mursal, with a broken chain. But the narration of Muhammad ibn Fudala, it goes with a muttasil isnad, going back to the Prophet alayhi salam. So they mentioned that there's a case regarding concerning that even though Muhammad ibn Fudail is said to be thiqah, but he's going against others who are thiqat. So in this case of the ulama of Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned hadith Muhammad ibn Fudail khata. Hadith Muhammad ibn Fudail khata. Akhta fihi Muhammad ibn Fudail, that Muhammad have made an error. So is Imam Bukhari rahimahullah highlighting, clarifying that the narration that as the chain that as Muhammad ibn Fudail and Amash and Abi Saleh and Abu Hurairah and Nabi alayhi salam, that narration, that isnad, there's an error. That isnad, that tariq, it's an error. What also you find that at Daraqutni, and these are like the master Daraqutni of the Aimma in this field, he mentioned هذا لا يصح مسندا, that is hadith with that complete chain going back to the Prophet ﷺ is not authentic. وهم في إسناده Ibn Fudail, that Ibn Fudail made an error in the isnad. وغيره يرويه, other than him have narrated this hadith, and Amash and Mujahid mursala, that others, and we said those others, they will be Abi Ishaq and also Zahida ibn Khudama, that they have narrated this hadith mursala. Narrated this hadith, so I mentioned that. So show that wahm occur from Muhammad ibn Fudail. So that's concerning, so in that isnad, it shows an error in the isnad. So ash-shudhuz may occur where Muhammad ibn Fudail, thiqa. But in this case, he made an error. So it shows that in hadith, that even those narrators were said to be thiqat, that they at times can make error. And that's the more meticulous area of ilm al-hadith. The area will have to be that area concerned that the errors of the thiqat are more of the more detailed matter regarding ilm al-hadith. Where sometimes because the person is said to be thiqa, like we said that with the fuqaha, the approach is that they will see that is a ziyadat thiqa maqbula, as we mentioned before, so they'll accept it. They will not accept it because they will take the rule that they follow, ziyadat thiqat maqbula mutlaqa. If a hadith come with an additional wording or isnad and the narrator is thiqat, they accept it. But al-hadith, as we discussed last week in the last session, they have a different approach. Then I mentioned in shudud fil matan. It mentioned a hadith concerned that, that mentioned many hadith, but this occurs in many hadith. So you find that most of the time we want to hear discussion of hadith of shudud, it mainly regarding hadith which is said regarding those cases in the matan, in the text itself. And you find many hadith that come in that category, and we'll mention some examples of those. And we might mention, I will mention some of those and leaving last week regarding that aziyat thiqa in the matan, regarding the Prophet Islam mentioned hadith concerned, I mentioned kullu dalalatin finnar, kullu dalalatin in khutbatul haja, kullu dalalatin finnar. That ziyada kullu dalalatin finnar, that ziyat thiqa, but with the extra wording in the hadith is authentic or not. And Nasahi say no, and the ulama said no, but still others who say because they take the follow the rule, ziyadat thiqa maqbula mutlaqa, they accept it. So those cases are many, as we might find out. So hukum, so that's an example. I will mention some others that they mention regarding concern a thiqa, where it comes to the person, that a person's a thiqa is a hadith, because of but the next matter they discuss regarding hukum hadith shadh, hukum ashadh. So hukum ashadh that they mention in generally, that is fall on the category of hadith daif. When hadith is said to be shadh or referred to as shadh, or a hadith is considered or graded as shadh, it means the hadith is daif. So shadh is of a form of hadith being shadh, being labeled as shadh. As when a hadith is labeled as shadh, is considered to be da'if. It's considered to be da'if. So that's of the things regarding hadith as shadh. So hadith shadh, the hukum, that's hadith that is da'if. That's an indication that the hadith is da'if, and that could be a part of a hadith. I'll mention that with the isnad of Muhammad ibn Fudal, and also in the case regarding the hadith that we mentioned last week regarding hadith wa kullu dalatin finnar, that is that section of that portion of hadith is da'if, but the rest of hadith may be considered to be still valid. So overall concerning ashadh is a reason for hadith to be considered to be da'if, and that hadith ashadh is also a hadith which is considered to be severe weak. It's going to be severe weak, not slight weakness, where is the indication that the person who's thiqa, he has made an error. It's a sign that the person who's thiqa have made an error. So an error is not something that can be corrected. It is something that is completely dismissed. So when something is said to be shadh, ruled as shadh, then it means it is dismissed and is not considered and it cannot be used as to support something else, because that's an error that the person fell into, and have that error been identified based upon comparison with other narrators who are thiqat. A discussion we have regarding hadith ash-shadh. What are the shurut if the shurut of hadith ash-shadh? So what will be the shurut, the thing to look out for, or criteria of hadith ash-shadh? So the criteria that they put in place are three. One, the narrator is thiqa, rawat al-thiqat. So the narrator is said to be thiqa. Second, infirad, that person, the single narrator. So ziyad hadith ash-shadh, 1 compared to 10, 1 compared to 5. So one is saying something that the others are not saying. So it's one person or a few that are saying something that their group is not saying, or they have added what the group are not saying. So that is, so it must be infirad. And second, so it is one against others. And the third, they mention al-mukhalifa. Al-mukhalifa, as in the definitions. With the mukhalifa, then you have a discussion between the ulama of hadith, that is this condition a must, that it must have some type of mukhalafa. One person is going against the others. Those who mentioned that it is a condition, and others mentioned that mukhalafa is not a condition, based upon, as we mentioned, that in the second definition, or the second part of the second part of hadith ash-shadh, in its definition, as we mentioned, as stated, ma infarad bi riwayatihi rawin, we find that a narrator tafarrud, that a single narrator have mentioned something odd, and is not of that level of dabt for it to be given much consideration. So that narrator may be one who's thiqah, but not of, so a person like that, him on his own against other thiqat, may not stand up with them. But a person said to be thiqat, then that's our next level of thiqat. Those are ones who really make mistakes. So is that person on that level where him on his own may not per se have that level of standing? So his hadith is considered to be shadh. So based upon this, of the ulama who mentioned that shadh, and that's a discussion, it's going on, ulama of contemporary times, or mashaykh of contemporary, regarding that some hold that for hadith to be considered or graded as shadh must be mukhalafa, and others who add mukhalafa is not a requirement. And you find many hadith said, and based upon the amal of the salaf, of the imma, then this also proved that at times they rule hadith to be shadh when the hadith has no mukhalafa. No, that is opposing. Another of the points that are discussed regarding hadith to shadh, that the term shadh, how it is used, or is it a common term used by the ulama of the past? Is shadh a common term used by the ulama of the past? So you'll find that the ulama of the past, they mention that, rarely use the word shadh. The ulama of the past, they don't often use the word shadh in hadith that they wish to reject. They more commonly use the word nakara, munkar, fi nakara. So they more use the word nakara, something which is, than the word shadh. So this is something they mention regarding concern of the discussion regarding. So the person has to be mindful in the books of hadith of the ulama of old, that you might find the word shadh not often used, but you might find another word that is used is nakara or munkar. Then that's sometimes an indication that's the word they more would use instead of the word shadh. So they would use the word munkar, nakara, more so than the word shadh. And also they'll use the word, sometimes they'll indicate that they said هذا hadith mahfuz wa hadha hadith fihi nakara. So the word mahfuz would mean that that's the hadith that is acceptable, and the one which is rejected is the one that's said to be fi nakara. So the word shadh, when it is used, it means that the hadith is da'if, is rejected, or that portion of the hadith is rejected. And the part that is accepted, the narration that is accepted, is the one that's said to be mahfuz. The one that's accepted, that's what a person, then they mentioned, Ibn Hajar mentioned those two words together, mahfuz and muqabal, ashadh. So the narration that is acceptable is referred to as mahfuz, and the portion that is rejected is referred to as shadh. So both go together, one the opposite of the other. The accepted portion or narration is said to be mahfuz, and the rejected narration is considered as shadh. So the mention regarding concerning this matter, فغالب يطلقون لفظ المنكر أو يصفون الراوي الشاذ بأنه وهم أو خطأ. That a person who narration is said to be that rejected, that he fell into error, or he made they made a mistake. So the more use those terms. Then I mention أما as for يطلقون على الرواية الصحيحة, that the correct narration, the sahih narration, بأنها محفوظ, that it will be considered to be mahfuz. So another word that means, another word of mahfuz will means sahih. That narration is sahih or sawab, or that is the one which is sawab. It's the correct version or the correct narration, or sahih, or they use the word that narration is sahih. So these are the terms that we'll use regarding indicating that this is the correct narration, and the other narration from that narrations that they are shadh. They are the ones that are said to be da'if. But to take into account that this matter regarding hadith shadh is also said of those matters that relates to ilm al-hadith. By one, it constitutes one of the conditions that has to be removed from the hadith for it to be considered to be sahih, and also very meticulous. For the person to detect this, he has to come across this, he has to gather all the narrations. The only way to discover this, the person has to gather all the narration on that single hadith to come to be able to can realize that someone made an error. It has to, the one has to combine or gather all the narrations for them to discover that there was an error that was made. On this matter, regarding books on this of contemporaries, mashayikh wa talabatul ilm and bahithun, that have written, try to put some book work together. A book that is out, that is in 4 volumes. It is referred to or named Al-Jami' fi Alfaz wa Riwayat Al-Shadha. I will mention another book before last week regarding on the same topic, where some of the talabatul ilm wal mashayikh of contemporary time try to research hadith that they deem to fall into this category of hadith shadh and put them in a separate a book. So consider to, so this one, it is in 4 volumes, and the other that we mentioned, others who have done some work on this field. So in this one, as an introduction, they discuss concerning ashad, hadith shadh, regarding some of the masail. The first one regarding is definition. So what is hadith shadh? They'll go through giving a definition regarding concerning the linguistic meaning, huwa al-infirad and the-jumhur, with a person that he separate that person that single oneself out from the majority, majority. Then they discuss regarding what is hadith shadh. They go to different aqwal of the ulama, or different ta'rifat of the ulama. They mention first al-Shafi'i, where Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, that have a definition of shadh. Some where his definition more so aligned to the definition by that align more so the definition of Ibn Hajar. So the definition of Ash-Shafi, Imam Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala, that his definition more aligned with that of Ibn Hajar. So they mention what is Ashad with Shafi. So Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala, as one of the imma that he mentioned, laysa ashaz min hadith, that shad of hadith, it is not. And yarwi a thika, where a narrator who is thika, hadithan, narrates a hadith, lam yarwi ghayru, where others did not narrate. Innama ashad, but rather what is shadh, min al hadith, of hadith, and yarwi a thiqat, where thiqat, hadithan, yushid anhum wahid fayakhalifuhum, where he mentioned that ashad is where a group of thiqat narrate a hadith, a single hadith, where one of them differ from others, from the other. One differ from the others. This is what he deems to be, was that yukhalifuhum, where the person, he goes against them, he contradicts them. So maybe 5 narrators, one of those 5 go against the majority. That is what he deemed to be ashadh. Then you have the Ta'rif al-Hakim, and also you have Ibn Salah and others who have given definition of shadh. But overall, they mentioned regarding said ashadh occur in the isnad and also in the matan, or both. Of the way to a person to come to this, that a person that some of the ulama might state this in their works. As I mentioned, Ad-Daraqutni in his book Al-Ilal, Imam al-Bukhari, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Abu Hatim, so the A'imma who precede us, An-Nasahi, they sometimes made mention of this. So of the A'imma, that they in their works, or when they discuss hadith, might mention that this person make an error, so they might be the one to bring this to our attention. Or for the person then, as a researcher, to gather all the hadith, and then see as to where the hadith leads regarding the sanad, or the turuq, and also the matan. Does anyone go against the grain of what is being mentioned by the majority? But overall, concerning that this book, it shows also the importance of this matter, where a shadh hadith impact regarding ahkam al-shar'iyyah. Shadh hadith have a great impact on rulings, ahkam al-shar'iyyah, regarding halal and haram. We might find a particular wording may be under discussion, and one may accept it, while others, where it may be considered to be shadh, but that other person may see it as a part of the hadith and is authentic, where another might see it as it is not authentic. So it can impact on rulings on hadith, and that's where you can send in books of fiqh, that you might find that sometimes it is highlighted a lot. So this book, it mentions, in this book they mention so they mention, for example, that a case of this, we mentioned that the Prophet had mentioned this hadith, they mentioned that يحب التيمم, that the Prophet had like do things in his right, من استطاع في شأنه كل, then in all of his affairs, في طهوره, in his purification, وترجله, and also in putting on of his clothing, his shoe, and also tanahul, and putting on his shoes. Then I mentioned قال Muslim وسواك, and also in his siwak. So that's an additional wording in the hadith regarding as-siwak being mentioned. So they mentioned concerning that narration regarding as-siwak, that it is shadh. That the narration of siwak, you find that one of the narrators, whose name is Muslim ibn Ibrahim, in that narration. So the hadith in the Abu Dawud, where mentioned the isnad, where the hadith mentioned, and Hafs ibn Umar, wa Muslim ibn Ibrahim, qala, but both says, hadatana Shu'bah, and Ash'ath ibn Sulaym, and Abihi, and Masruq, and Aisha al-Hadith. They mentioned regarding concern that wahm, that an error occur from Muslim ibn Ibrahim, when he mentioned as-siwak. So he added the word siwak regarding the Prophet that mentioned that you regarding it. No, he liked to start things from his right in for things of his purification, tarajjul, put on his clothing, and also putting on of his shoe. Then also he had regarding a siwak and also the use of his siwak. So they mentioned that Muslim Ibn Ibrahim, he mentioned siwak, and he goes against everyone else that narrated upon Shu'bah. So of those, Hafs ibn Umar, Sulaiman ibn Harb, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, Hajjaj ibn Milhal, Abu Walid Tayalisi. So everyone else did not, and others, Muad ibn Muhadh, Khalid ibn Harith, so everyone else did not mention siwak, except for Muslim ibn Ibrahim. But all others who narrate this hadith, they did not mention siwak. So they mentioned that there's no mukhalafa in that, just that. So based upon this, they mentioned that the hadith is daif and weak. And so the hadith they mentioned over 16 different narrators who did not mention this. 16 different narrators who did not include siwak, with the exception of Muslim ibn Ibrahim. So when they discuss, when they look at the hadith overall, then they come out to the judgment that he made an error. He made an error. But as we said, that these type of books or these type of research is for the talib, especially concerning hadith and even concerning fiqh. To have these research to help us regarding matters regarding ahkam al-shar'iyya, halal and haram, that we can use these resources as something to help and to guide us regarding certain wordings in the hadith that may be under discussion between the ulama. Whether it is confirmed to be a part of the hadith or not, depending on a person's conclusion, but this can have a drastic effect upon the person, the ruling that is, and the judgment that is passed on that particular thing, as being halal, or being haram, or being from the sunnah, or not being from the sunnah. So looking into matters regarding hadith studies in detail is very important. Regarding ruling, we're going to consider matters regarding akadiyah, matters of belief, or matters of ahkam, halal and haram. So it's important regarding this matter regarding ashadh, and knowing what is shadh, and how it occurs, especially regarding in mutun. More so regarding al-mutun, and also the same thing regarding al-sanad, but it's important regarding the talib al-ilm that is familiar with this discussion, and also of works that can aid him in navigating regarding this discussion to make his judgment more sound, or at least the awareness of what could be a possible second view, where some may affirm this matter and some may not. But the person understand where they're coming from and what's the reason behind this khilaf and the source of this khilaf. That is not something which is personal, but more so something which is based upon an-naqd al-hadithiyya. So that inshallah ta'ala will end. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه إلى سبيل والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله.